Cranial cavity. Fingers and toes. Digital regions. Thigh. Femoral regions. Forehead. Frontal. Groin. Inguinal region. Chin. Mental. Nose area. Nasal. Mouth. Oral region. Eye area. Orbital region. Anterior knee. Patellar region. Pelvic cavity. Genital region. Pubic region. Breastbone area. Sternal. Ankle region. Tarsal region. Chest. Thoracic region. Navel. Umbilical region. Buttock. Gluteal region. Area of back between ribs and hips. Lumbar region. Posterior head. Occipital region. Posterior elbow. Olecranon. Posterior knee area. Popliteal region. Area between hips. Sacral. Shoulder blade region. Scapular region. Posterior, the calf. Sural region. Area of spinal cord. Vertebral. Pedal region. Bottom of foot. Plantar region. Contains heart and lungs. Thoracic cavity. Mouth. Oral cavity. Contains the cranial cavity and spinal column. Dorsal body cavity. Both the pelvic and abdominal cavities. Abdominopelvic cavity. Thoracic and abdominopelvic cavities. Ventral body cavities. Horizontal division of the body into upper and lower portions. Transverse plane. Divides body into left and right. Sagittal plane. Divides body into front and back. Frontal plane. To stand erect with arms at the sides and palms of the hands turned forward. Anatomical position. To the right and left of the epigastric region. Hypochondriac region. Superior to the umbilical region. Epigastric region. Abdominal regions to left and right of umbilical region. Lumbar region. Inferior to the umbilical region. Hypogastric region. Abdominal regions to left and right of hypogastric region. Iliac region. Toward the midline. Medial. Away from the midline. Lateral. Below. Inferior. Above. Superior. Back. Posterior. Front. Anterior. Nearer to the trunk of the body. Proximal. Farther from the trunk of the body. Distal. Near the surface. Superficial. Between two structures. Intermediate. Functions are: synthesis of vitamin D forms external body covering responsible for body temperature regulation. Integumentary system. Site of skeletal muscle attachment protects internal organ site of blood cell formation. Skeletal system. Maintains posture, generates body heat. Muscular system. Fast-acting control system responds to internal and external stimuli, activates muscles and glands. Nervous system. Regulates hormones responsible for growth and reproduction. Slow-acting control system. Endocrine system. Transports blood around the body. Cardiovascular system. Returns lymph fluids to blood vessels, and helps get rid of bacteria and viruses. Lymphatic system. Brings oxygen into the body. Gets rid of carbon dioxide. Respiratory system. Breaks down food into smaller molecules. Absorbs these nutrients into the body. Releases indigestible waste. Digestive system. Eliminates nitrogenous waste from the body. Regulates water, electrolyte and acid-base balance of the blood. Urinary system. Consists of the skin, sweat/oil glands, hair, and nails. Integumentary system. The outer layer of the skin. Epidermis. a layered tissue underneath the epidermis. Dermis, also called a subcutaneous layer, this is a layer of fat is located under the dermis of the skin. Hypodermis, a pigment that gives the skin, hair, and eyes color, and helps protect the body from harmful UV radiation that causes skin cancer. Melanin, a cavity in skin containing the root of a hair, and is attached to oil glands. Hair follicle, the portion of the living skin on which the nail body sits. Nail bed, part of nail which functions to protect and regulate water intake/output. Nail cuticle, actual nail part of the nail. Nail body, the part of the hair located below the surface of the epidermis. Hair root, found in the dermis, secrete the oil sebum. Sebaceous glands, found through the body, release sweat. Sweat glands, in the pubic and underarm areas that secrete a thick, protein sweat that gives the characteristic sweat smell. Apocrine glands, most superficial layer of skin, replaced every 4 to 6 weeks. Epidermis, spidery black cells that produce the brown to black pigment called melanin. Melanocytes, dense, irregular connective tissue consisting of 2 regions. Dermis, ducts that empty into hair follicles, excreting oily substances. Sebaceous glands, the product of sebaceous glands. Sebum, these glands produce sweat. Eccrine glands, fibrous protein that is responsible for the strength and water resistance of the skin surface. Keratin, a protein that is a main constituent of connective tissue. Collagen, a natural pigment that protects the cells in the skin and in deeper layers from the hazardous effects of UV radiation by absorbing sunlight. Melanin, layer of the skin made up of connective tissue and fat that acts as insulation and padding for the skin. Hypodermis, made, tiny openings on top of skin with sweat and oil glands function, let sweat and oil come out of skin. Pore, makes the hair on a person's arm stand up to keep them warm. Erector pili/arrector pili, provide nutrients to the skin and help regulate body temperature. Blood vessel, nail, skin pigment. Melanin, true layer, contains blood vessels, nerves, hair follicles. Dermis. Outer layer of skin. Epidermis. Contagious. Fungal infection. Athlete's foot. Bacterial infection of sebaceous glands. Acne. Oil glands. Sebaceous glands. Oil. Sebum. Fat layer. Subcutaneous layer. Primary cause of skin cancer. Direct sunlight. Involves destruction of epidermis, dermis, and subcutaneous layer. Third-degree burn. Sweat glands. Sudoriferous glands. Most superficial layer of skin. Replaced every 4 to 6 weeks. Epidermis. The most abundant epidermal cells, they function mainly to produce keratin. Keratinocytes. Spidery black cells that produce the brown to black pigment called melanin. Melanocytes. Dense, irregular connective tissue consisting of 2 regions, the papillary and the reticular areas. Dermis. Ducts that empty into hair follicles, excreting oily substances. Sebaceous glands. The product of sebaceous glands. It is a mixture of oily substances and fragmented cells that acts as a lubricant to keep the skin soft and moist. Sebum. These glands produce sweat. Eccrine glands. Secrete milky protein that acts as a nutrient medium for the microorganisms found on the skin. Apocrine glands. Fibrous protein that is responsible for the strength and water resistance of the skin surface. Keratin. A protein that is a main constituent of connective tissue. Collagen. A natural pigment that protects the cells in the skin and in deeper layers from the hazardous effects of UV radiation by absorbing sunlight. Melanin. Layer of the skin made up of connective tissue and fat that acts as insulation and padding for the skin. Hypodermis. Outer layer. Protects against pathogens. Epidermis. 2 layers. Epidermis and dermis. Integumentary system. Made of keratin. Protects scalp from light from sun. Hair. Cancers that develop from melanges. Melanoma. Sebum and dead skin cells form plugs in hair follicles. Bacteria trapped in. Acne. Gives skin pigmentation and protects from UV rays. Melanocytes. Inner layer contains major structures of skin, collagen, blood vessels, nerve endings, glands, sensory receptors, hair follicles. Dermis. Adipose tissue, proves insulation for body. Subcutaneous fat. Layers of skin. Skin cells. Epithelial cells. Produces bile, rock. Liver. Stores bile. Gallbladder. Produces insulin. Pancreas. Blood cell graveyard. First line of defense in infection. Spleen. Vestigial organ in lower right abdominal quadrant. Appendix. Organ in the dorsal space, filters blood. Kidneys. Sits on top of the kidneys. Adrenal glands. Wave-like movement that moves food through the digestive system. Peristalsis. Connects the nasal and oral cavities with the larynx and esophagus. Referred to as the throat. Pharynx. Voice box. Larynx. Transfers food to the stomach. Esophagus. Thin leaf-shaped valve that keeps food and liquid from entering the lungs. Epiglottis. Windpipe. Trachea. Contained in the larynx, produces sound. Vocal cords. Tube that goes to each lung. Bronchi. Small air sacs of the lungs where gas exchange takes place. Alveoli. A pair of organs that is a major part of respiratory. Lungs. Dome-shaped muscle used during respiration. Separates the chest from abdominal cavity. Diaphragm. Found between the ribs. Intercostal muscles. Components of the cardiovascular system. Heart, blood vessels. Supplies the heart with oxygenated blood. Coronary arteries. Main artery in the upper arm. Brachial artery. Main artery in the neck. Carotid artery. Main artery of the thighs. Femoral artery. Artery on thumb side of lower arm. Radial artery. Artery posterior of the medial malleus, supplies blood to the foot. Posterior tibialis. Takes blood away from the heart. Arteries. takes blood toward the heart. Veins. Smallest vessels of the body. Capillaries. Largest veins of the body. Vena cavas. Largest artery of the body. Aorta. Liquid portion of the blood in which the blood cells and nutrients are suspended. Plasma. Largest components of cells in the body, responsible for carrying O2 and CO2 to and from the tissues. Red blood cells. Fights infection, establishes immunity against certain diseases. White blood cells. Responsible for clotting blood. Platelets. Red blood cells. Erythrocytes. White blood cells. Leukocytes. Pressure exerted against the walls of the artery when the ventricles contract. Systolic. Pressure exerted against the walls of the artery when the ventricle is at rest. Blood. Diastolic. Brain and spinal cord. Central nervous system. Made up that carry messages to and from the central nervous system. Peripheral nervous system. Fight or flight, pupils dilate. Sympathetic nervous system. Conserves energy and slows the heart rate down. Parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system. Largest organ of the body. Skin. Skin. Integumentary system. Outermost layer of skin. Epidermis. Contains sweat glands, sebaceous glands, hair follicles, blood vessels, nerve endings. Dermis. Made up of adipose and connective tissue. Subcutaneous layer. Secretes hormones. Endocrine system. Study of the body parts visible to the naked eye. Anatomy. Study of the function of body parts. Physiology. Reabsorbs water and stores feces. Colon. Standing erect, facing forward with arms to the side with palms out. Anatomical position. To the side of the body. Lateral. Imaginary divisions of the body. Anatomical planes. Also known as the median plane, is a vertical plane that runs lengthwise and divides the body into right and left segments. Sagittal plane. Also known as the coronal plane, divides the body into front and back halves. Frontal plane. Also known as the horizontal plane, parallel to the ground, and divides the body into upper and lower halves. Transverse plane. An imaginary line drawn vertically in the middle of the body. Midline. A line drawn from the armpit down to the ankle. Metaxillary line. Toward the front of the body. Anterior. Toward the back of the body. Posterior. Another word for anterior. Ventral. Another word for posterior. Dorsal. Refers to both sides. Bilateral. Toward the torso or trunk. Proximal. Away from the torso or trunk. Distal. Bony framework held together by layers of muscle and ligaments. Musculoskeletal system. Connects bone to bone. Ligaments. Connects muscle to bone. Tendons. Skull. Cranium. Fused bones of the upper jaw. Maxillae. Lower jaw that moves with a hinge joint. Mandible. Spinal column, principal support of the body. Vertebrae. Fluid-filled pad of tough elastic cartilage that acts as shock absorbers and allows movement of the spine. Intervertebral disc. First 7 bones of the vertebrae, most prone for injury. Cervical spine. Upper back, 12 bones. Thoracic spine. Lower back, most immovable of the vertebrae, has 5 bones. Lumbar. Back wall of the pelvis, contains 5 bones. Sacrum. Tailbone, has 4 fused bones. Coccyx. Breastbone. Sternum. 11th and 12th rib. Floating ribs. The last 5 pairs of ribs. False ribs. Collarbone. Clavicle. The inferior portion of the sternum. Xiphoid process. Donut-shaped structure that consists of the sacrum and coccyx. Pelvis. Wings of the pelvis. Iliac crest. anterior and inferior portion of the pelvis. Pubis. Pelvic socket which fits the rounded top of the femur head. Acetabulum. Largest strongest bone in the body, thigh bone. Femur. Kneecap. Patella. Shin bone, weight-bearing bone. Tibia. Small bone in the lower leg. Fibula. Heel bone. Calcaneus. Make up the proximal portion of the foot. Tarsals. Bones that form the arch of the foot. Metatarsal. Bones of the fingers and toes. Phalanges. Shoulder blade. Scapula. Proximal bone of the upper arm. Humerus. Lateral bone of the forearm. Radius. The medial bone of the forearm. Ulna. 8 bones in the wrist. Carpals. The bones that gives the hand structural strength. Metacarpals. Place where one bone connects to another. Joint. Bending toward the body. Flexion. Straightening away from the body. Extension. Movement away from the midline. Abduction. Movement toward the midline. Adduction. Permits widest range of motion for extension and flexion. Ball and socket joint. Located in elbow, knee, and fingers for movement. Hinged joint. Allows for a turning motion, includes the joint between the head and neck. Pivot joint. Connect the small bones in the hands and feet. Simplest movement between bones. Gliding joint. Shaped to permit combinations of limited movements along the perpendicular planes. Example, allows the ankle of the foot to turn inward. Saddle joint. Amount of bones in the body. 206. Can be contracted or relaxed by the will of the individual, known as skeletal muscle. Voluntary muscle. Carry out autonomic muscular functions such as the digestive system, also known as smooth muscle. Involuntary muscle. Found in the walls of the heart, a type of involuntary muscle. Cardiac muscle.